Hello. Shalom. Shalom to the brethren. Welcome to all. Okay, the plan is to have a follow-up discussion with Mathew Steele. So, yeah, you may remember the discussion we had last time, having a lot to do with the source of existence and what it is to be a part of existence, and how my Christian perspective fits into that, how my rebirth and my changing up of identity, when I stopped being the old man and that man died, and I was born of spirit and water as the new man, and how that fits with the difference between physical reality or concept reality, spiritual reality, abstract reality, and how these different things fit together. And Matthew's perspective was physically based, and he somehow saw some continuation of identity just in the sort of the chemical wedding of chemically going back to everything. Hello, Honesty Angel. Shalom. So yeah, so maybe I'll ask Matthew about that if I remember, about specifically how he talked about meaning continuing, because from what I remember, I would not think of that as meaningful as he described it. And described consciousness as being something like traffic, so that you have all the different separate parts that come together to make this overall thing that we put a name on, if that makes any sense. And so hopefully he'll be here pretty soon. We're scheduled to start at 4:30, so it's only about 3 minutes off. Let me just check my email real quick in case he's emailed me since I last checked. And nothing yet. So then he'll probably be here soon. If he was going to miss it, he probably would have emailed me. And Matthew also had a debate recently with Mr. Batman, and I like Mr. Batman a lot. Him and I are both Torah keeping, and so we keep Sabbath, don't eat pork, that sort of thing. And well, I like his delivery of good proofs and his confidence in how good they are. He doesn't really sympathize with the doubt of his interlocutor. So yeah, I look forward to just seeing more of Mr. Batman. And boopity boop, what else has been going on? So I know that I wanted to talk to Matthew some more about my perspective on hell. But I really got to question Matthew about abstracts being in a mind. Because if so, then, like, the fact that they'll exist even if there's, you know, like, the math that's involved in the universe, for instance. Like, it didn't wait until humans observed it by telescope and thought about the math involved. It didn't wait until then to exist, you know? So the abstracts were there when no one was thinking about it. So if it really is something that needs a mind to think of it, then that would point to God. It wouldn't point to there not being a God. And I remember, well, just before this, I was listening back to my last interview with Mathew, and he said that minds come from brains. And I told him what I thought of that. So I do hope he'll be here soon. So I'll just talk about a few things I've been working on, maybe, well, one at a time. So I've got this new channel. So let's see here. Oh, look, Dapper Dino is going to go up against Mr. Batman tomorrow. Okay, let me go ahead and screen share here. As long as I'm just kind of killing time until Mathew gets here. Boop, boop, boom, share screen. Okay, I'm making it happen now. So, okay, there it is. Okay, so, right here is, oh, looks like I've been joined. That is Mathew. Okay, well, we'll just skip that whole part of things.
Over on Gmail, and didn't realize you had the link here. How's it going?
I'm good. I heard you about at the part where you said Gmail.
Yeah, I was waiting for the link to come by email, so I was waiting there. I didn't think to come check your channel. My apologies.
Okay, my apologies too. I think that's kind of the standard thing to do. And it crossed my mind, but I was like, oh, I'll just do chat. So, hey, Mathew, it's good to hear your voice again. And check it out. I have a camera now. Hey. So this is me. And then,
sorry, I have company over. My wife's family is here for dinner, so I'm going to keep my camera off. But it's good to see you. You got quite the impressive beard there.
Oh yeah, that's what they say. I just haven't cut it in a while.
So do you have any, aside from the debate that I had with Mr. Batman, was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or what in particular is on your mind these days?
Okay, well, these days I've been focused on my own projects more, but I was just listening back to our last discussion, and I know I wanted to maybe discuss my perspective on hell more, even though it sounds like for you that's not really a stumbling block for you. So maybe I don't really need to go that route today.
Well, I don't know. Can you explain what you mean about stumbling block? It's an important issue for the Christian doctrine, and if it's something that's important to you that you want to share, then I mean, I'm here to talk. So whatever you want to talk about is fine.
Well, you said you don't hold to the whole eternal torture thing, and so that would mean that I don't really need to dispel that. So I think the burden of sin and what's going on in the whole world, and like what the power of truth and the spirit of truth is relative to all that, I think all of that would be very worthy of discussion. So maybe you could we could discuss if you understand the worldview, like how Christians see the outside world and the progression of history, and Christ's place in that, and Satan's place in that, and all of that. I would like to start with talking about Mr. Batman's debate. It also brings up a point that I have a question about that was in our last discussion, where you discussed the consciousness, who we are, our identity, as being something that arises from a bunch of factors. So you use traffic as an example, but I described how I see it as a two-way relationship between our will and the mind. But then you talked about being one with the universe, so that when this life ends, we go back into the universe. So there's no difference between like you and the people who came before you, or the other things that came before you, or what's going to come from you. And the way that's presented as if it's sort of like gives meaning, but when I sort of take out the measures and do the math on it, I don't really see where the meaning is in there. And yeah, so that's from our last discussion. That might be a good place to start. Like, do you find meaning in that, or is it just that?
It's a very difficult question.
Because I think there's a different kind of beauty too that could be involved. Like, natural beauty is not the same thing as like meaning. So
right,
yeah.
The hardest part, I think, for me to reconcile is that I think the reason that we have wound up where we are as a society, as a civilization, is because of our needs and our desires. We have wound up where we are because we are looking for something and always searching for it, generation after generation, striving towards something that we don't currently possess. And I see that through human history of, I can't just chalk it all up to expansion for the sake of greed or conquest. There's something about our lives that makes the search itself sort of the overarching path of humanity, where one person stops and leaves off, another continues. And the question then becomes, of course, what is everyone looking for? And it doesn't surprise me at all that so many people have the fulfillment, I don't want to say the finish or the end of that search, because even for a Christian, I think there's the rest of your life to try to understand the character and the nature of God and your place in reality as to serve him best. I think that it's just as you've described, you know, your old life ended and the new life began. And that was, even though we see that path differently, you and I, we both agree that there is the progression, the movement towards a greater understanding of all of the questions that have driven us since we were first able to ask any questions, first able to figure out what everything around us was, to have any knowledge, and to try to answer questions that where the answers weren't evident or even coherent. Because as a child, when you're, say, a year and a half old, you don't know any of the questions that are going to plague you when you're 12. And when you're 12, you don't know any of the questions that are going to plague you when you're 25. And then by the time you're 75, you have a whole nother set of questions. There's always that drive, that search for understanding and knowledge and fulfillment. And I can't help but feel on a very visceral level that the search for knowledge and understanding is what drives us, because it is our engine that keeps us going. That is what makes us special, is that need to find out. And that is, for me, where religion comes in. Even though I don't accept it, I understand that is its purpose. That is why it's there. It is for precisely that reason, for purpose, for greater understanding, and for things to make sense. And the love, the feeling of completion, of I don't know exactly how to describe my understanding of it, other than being part of something that is so much greater than yourself and so much more beautiful than anything that you could represent on your own. Finding that and becoming a part of that and serving something that is greater than yourself does seem to be, in whatever capacity that might be, it does seem to be what humanity as a whole is trying to figure out and achieve. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for that as far as science is concerned. When you look at humanity from a psychological perspective, that seems to be what drives us, trying to figure out, why did this happen? Where are we going? All of these questions that cause anxiety and depression and keep us up at night. They are really who we are. And I don't think it's ever fair for someone to decide, I've learned all there is to know, and I can stop looking now. And that is very important in and of itself. I certainly don't think that I'm there. And you don't sound like you're there. You're not at the point where you would consider your understanding of reality to be finished. There's still a lot for you to know and to learn, and to ways for you to grow. I think that is universal for everyone, in whatever way makes the most sense to them. And that is not always going to be in a positive, healthy way for everyone. And that, I think, is why values are so hard to discuss. There's when people don't agree on what is the most important thing to achieve. But values in and of themselves there's no way for me, in my perspective of reality, to ever tell someone else that these are the values you should have, and here's why, if that value doesn't start with love and trying to do no harm. because I mean, I'm rambling at this point, and you've been listening very patiently. So if there's anything that you want to say to respond to that, please do. But that is where I start from because of how it makes me feel, and has my entire life. I've always been. My mother tells the story of. I was apparently very popular among the nurses in the hospital when I was born because all I wanted to do was snuggle. So they would trade me off and fight over me because I just wanted to snuggle up, and they just loved it, and they, you know, it's my turn. No, it's my turn. And that was when I was a newborn baby. So apparently that is, you know, ultimately the core of who I am. I am someone who cares deeply about love and the connection that I feel. I think you and I have grown to know each other a little bit, and that to me, just that connection is it's important in a way that can't really be articulated, no matter what you believe.
Yeah, I'm just, absorb some because that was quite a lot. So then, so how do you see the world then? Because, in Christianity, we see the fall, and then we see Rome was coming forth as sort of the representatives of humanity, and the might makes right kind of power that was going to carry into the future. And then we see the truth that Christianity has brought. In my perspective, is that it's like it took 1,500 years for the elites to, and I might compare it to like to the globe Earth, because one argument, and I don't know if this will make sense to you, or not, Matthew, but one argument that some people make that it's a globe Earth is that the elites don't gain anything by telling us the truth. So then it would make sense that they're lying to us. And so then the globe is a lie, so the Earth is flat. And when really that doesn't make sense, because if they cannot hide that the Earth is a globe, then if they tried to tell us it was flat, we would catch them in the lie, and that wouldn't help them any. So, of course, it actually does benefit them in that scenario to tell us the truth that it's a globe. And, I think that's what happened with the Enlightenment, is it just came to the point that they couldn't deny a lot of this. And so they finally adopted it. And I don't know how much of this would actually be like conspiracies or whatever, or how much would instead be spiritual things that happen. And then that would get into just like for me to be who I was, I couldn't let truth freely flow through me. And once it did freely flow through me, I was no longer that previous person. So if I had earlier in my life let truth flow through me like that, then I would have stopped being that person earlier, and that person wouldn't have existed. So it's like when I was still the sinner, I could only be the sinner as long as I could resist truth.
How could you explain, from your perspective, the divine command theory? I don't know enough about Torah adhering Christianity to know how that you see that and how Mr. Batman sees that, because I understand you're both. I'm trying to use the proper term here. Torah.
Okay. Well, I would be a compatibilist as far as divine command theory goes. Who Yehovah is, he is the one who exists. And so there's something very deep about existence, something very deep about truth. There's a deep core to it all. That's why he's the unmoved mover. He's the uncaused causer. Is he's really that core fact of fact. You know, that's the Father. And so he cannot tell a lie, which limits his identity. Like, he has to be himself, and he is truth, and he cannot tell a lie. And so, by definition, objective morality is intrinsic to who Yehovah is. Like, the fact that there is fact, that deep truth is where objective morality comes from. So then, to hear Yehovah expressing himself as like Father from beyond, or expressing himself through his Son, the Messiah, or to hear him expressing himself through truth and through reason. I mean, so when we talk about divine command theory, this idea that morality is founded on God, or depends on, like, God decides what's moral and commands morality into existence. You know, I never want to detach truth from Christ. That's very important. And we can see that, like, he is the truth, and there's a truth about morality, and so it's really intrinsic to his identity. I wouldn't personally describe it as commanding it, even though that is also an accurate description. But he commands it based on who he is. And this gets into some deeper philosophical kind of stuff. Like, there's an argument that the Trinity must be true, because otherwise God's love for himself would be narcissistic if he was only one person. And I personally, I believe in the Spirit. I believe in Messiah. I believe in the Father. I believe in one God. And so I don't really do math on it, you know? But so if it was just the Father loving the Father, that would supposedly be narcissistic. And to me, that's not a good proof, because God worships God. And but then maybe it is a good proof, because you do have the fact of fact, you know, everything and everyone is generated through Christ. And so then you have this relationship between this deepest truth in the universe by way of the King of the universe, Christ. And then the Spirit of truth, right? Or the Spirit of God. And what does that really mean for something to be a spirit? So that God can dwell in me and speak through me, and that he can act in your life, Matthew, and speak through you even at moments. And
if I may,
yeah, please do.
wholly apart from my beliefs and my perspective, can you say if you think that anything I've said or anything I've expressed seems to be what you're saying there? That I'm trying to wrap my head around God's plan
Okay.
and how even a non-believer could serve that plan. So that was my intent with asking about the divine command theory. Is I've talked to so many different kinds of believers that some of them believe that free will is completely our own responsibility, full stop. Some say that that everything is God's will, and you say you're a compatibilist. So if you could, you must have an opinion on how I, being here talking to you as a self-described atheist, would come and have this conversation with you, and that there must be some reason for that in the grander purpose. So could you explain how you see that? I think that would be very enlightening for me.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't know what divine command theory was, so I looked it up, and it said that it talks about morality being based on God's commands. So not necessarily, which is why I didn't go in the direction that you're asking now. So you're asking about like the idea that everything is for his purposes, even perhaps terrible things or mundane things or whatever the case. And you know, hmm. I mean, that really is perhaps the core of the difficult question. Um, and I don't know if there's really much I can say on it. I know one thing that puts it in perspective is how short a time this life is in contrast to eternity. And so, and then I know what the scripture says on it. The scripture says that we are like seeds now. So, if I may read some from 1 Corinthians 15, that might be right on point. Then, okay, here I go. Then I will share it. Okay, I'll just share my entire screen apparently. Okay, okay, this is a good place to start. So some of the believers are not trusting in the bodily resurrection. And Paul writes this to their shame and says, but some will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Fool, that which thou sowest. Okay, let me see if I can read it in like plainer English a little bit. But some will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Fool, that which you sow is not made alive, except it die. In that which you sow not that body that shall be, but bear grain. It may chance of a wheat, or of some other. But God gives it a body, as it has pleased him. To every seed his own body. All flesh, not the same flesh, but one kind, one flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, another of birds, also celestial bodies, and bodies terrestrial. But the glory of the celestial, one, and the glory of the terrestrial, another. One glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. For star differs from star in glory, so also the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a flesh body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a flesh body, there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living breath. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. Howbeit, that not first which is spiritual, but that which is flesh, and afterward that which is spiritual. The first man of the earth, earthy, the second man, the Lord from heaven. As the earthy, such they also that are earthy, and as the heavenly, such they also that are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. And that will do. So I don't know if you follow how that fits.
Well, I was just reading the, I didn't see which version you were looking at, so I was reading the New King James. Long as you were, and it wasn't exactly the same, but it was close enough.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is that the word spirit means a gust of air. So that's why we have the word ghost, because earlier on in the English language, ghost and gust were the same thing. So the Holy Ghost is the Holy Gust. So when he talks there about the first Adam was made a living breath, the second Adam was made a life-giving gust. And that's related also to the word spirit is related to the words inspiration and the word respiration. And well, I just think that gives some perspective to kind of start to get where I'm coming from and what I'm talking about. But because you were asking about the purpose, so the focus of that then is the seed, right? You know, for the spiritual purpose, for these deep, eternal spiritual purposes of making the beings we're going to be, what kind of seed is required for that? And what kind of awareness is required? You know, what is possible out there in, the potentials that's, evil and wrong that needs to be blocked against? And how do you block against that for eternity for these free beings, you know? And so what I see a lot that is going on so far is we're in the seed phase of everything about humanity. And sin has to be put away so that it is away. Otherwise, it's like God telling a lie, just like saying sin is put away. If we're free beings, we have to actually learn and have it put away through that learning. And it's not the same thing as being trained. I mean, learning truth is different than being indoctrinated, which is also different than instinctual response to reward, you know? And yeah, truth is really powerful. And that ties back into the world, because I was comparing my identity to the world's identity earlier, where I had to block truth or else I would no longer be who I was. Well, this world has to block truth or it'll no longer be what it is. And so you have this Darwinian evolution kind of thing of like all these social institutions. They all have to resist truth. And then this ties in deeply spiritually. So, you know, the devil sends the beast with wrath because he knows his time is short. But I would sort of want to bridge the spiritual and the practical before I started just like talking prophecy at you. You know what I mean?
I'm still trying to understand how you think. It's very important for me to learn when someone expresses a perspective that I haven't heard before, or expresses a purpose, or not a purpose, a perspective that I thought I understood before in a way that I didn't. I'm still trying to grasp yours, where you're coming from, how you process, how you, as you're saying, the learning aspect of, I don't even know how to put it in the right terminology to make sure that we're communicating the same thing here. I definitely understand the differentiation of indoctrination versus learning. That is very important, because you can force someone to do anything and tell them to do something without them understanding why. But the learning, there has to be a motive from the person doing the learning to be receptive to it, to be open to that change in themselves, even if it's to become more of who they were intended to be, who they couldn't help but be.
Well, so
some people don't have that, as far as I can tell. Some people just don't have that capacity to learn what they should learn.
Yeah, and so
what do you think about that?
So long as we're on that exact topic, maybe we could discuss what I mean about learning truth. Because like when I learned math, then you know, I mean, trying to describe what it was like back in kindergarten or whatever, but it was just like you have the 3 and then you'd have the 4 and you could count them each and you could count to 7, and then they would get you to understand what it means to say 3 + 4 = 7. And then like at that point I know 3 + 4 = 7, and anything that tries to change that would just be some semantic wordplay or something. Because it really is true, and it was proven true to me, and I actually understood that truth, which is so then people could learn history 2 ways. They could learn history as like I'm being told what the history is, and I'm believing that whatever I'm told actually happened in real life, basically. Or you can learn history like, okay, I'm being told that this is the history, this comes from sources. If I know this much about the sources, then that kind of tells me this much, and that fits into the whole scheme of things that I've been learning over the course of my whole life. And so then you're learning that, on the most fundamental level, you're learning that there are people, in my case, I'd be learning that there are people who offer this information. And then I'd be looking into it to see how reliable I think that information is. So, like really learning truth directly, or what we're learning more directly, or what we're assuming for some reason is two very different things. But do you follow what I'm saying about these different types of learning?
Yes, I think so, but not completely. I think I'm trying to understand how the will factors into it, and how much of it is based on our nature as individuals. That's a dynamic that I don't understand from your perspective. Is
Very.
how what you can't help but do, if that's even coherent to you. Because it seems to me there are things that we can't help but do, and there are things we do because we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at
But both define us.
both what?
But both define us.
Yeah, well, what defines us, that would be a bit of a deep discussion, but just stepping back, we were talking about free will as opposed to determinism. Might be sort of a way to summarize it in technical terms. Is that sort of what you were talking about?
I hadn't, no, right then I wasn't talking about that, but I did eventually want to come back around to that, because you did mention that you were a compatibilist, and this is all, it's all the structure of the way you're explaining how you see reality it's fascinating to me, because I haven't heard of a perspective, especially from a Christian, explained this way before. Maybe it'll help if I flesh out just a little bit what I mean. My understanding of knowledge is that you're born, and as I explained in the debate with Mr. Batman, you're born and you develop as an infant and then a toddler, and eventually you're able to recognize yourself in a mirror, and you learn the words for things, and you start understanding who your parents are, and your environment, and what things hurt you and what things don't hurt you. And then you start recognizing yourself in a mirror and thinking actively, and eventually thinking about thinking, and being able to process more abstracts than, as an infant, you can't really process abstracts much at all. But once you reach a certain age, you're able to sort of evaluate the way you learn and the way you think, and some of that you have control over, and some of it you don't. Some people are much more predisposed to a certain addiction, or a fascination with birds, or whatever, something about the world that is particularly captures their interest. And the redefinition of yourself that you've described, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it sounds to me like you had a transformative, a new foundational explanation of who you were to yourself that is equivalent to you of becoming a new person. And how that all translates to who you were before and who you would eventually become, the free will aspect of that is completely a mystery to me, because I don't understand how that could have happened to you without your choice. I can see if it was something that was your choice, and I could see if it was something that was completely out of your control. I don't really understand the compatibilist aspect of that. To give into that, both intentionally and unintentionally. Maybe you could explain.
Yeah, because I don't know if I would come at it explaining the compatibilist aspect first. In John's first letter, he talks about how he's bringing what we knew from prime or from the beginning. And that it's also something new. And John is very good at really speaking in ways that address the spiritual heart of the matter. And I don't know how easy it is to follow for someone who hasn't lived it, but for those of us who've lived it, it's very easy to read John's simple words and follow what he's saying about us. And that's what you were saying, kind of regarding compatibilism and free will and my change of who I was. Oh yeah, so the way I might first come at it is like, it was like I learned 3 + 4 = 7, and I could never unlearn it, except it was just such a bigger, more drastic, intricate topic. And there's laws of logic, but there's also there are intuitive laws of reason. Because logic is technical, but there's also intuitive reason, or yeah. And so definitely the spiritual underpinnings that have run through history and that the scriptures speak on, and that anything we study about humanity, we're going to be seeing the same spiritual underpinnings and stuff. I started to recognize it, not as something I thought of as spiritual, but something I thought of as well, I don't have words for this, but I can see stuff that's going on, And there's the comparison I make sometimes, the coffee mug in the swimming pool. I can have the coffee mug right up here, and the swimming pool is at my next door neighbor's, and if I look over their fence, from this distance, if I hold the coffee mug close to my face, it's going to look bigger than the swimming pool. And yet I know by intuition very easily that the coffee mug pales in comparison to the swimming pool. And so, the devil doesn't want us to trust our intuitive abilities. And in fact, if we are self-deceptive, then those intuitive abilities can be very dangerous, because we can sort of take wiggle room to go all sorts of places. And as far as free will and compatibilism, how that fits into all this is is he's just trying to describe reality. And so, what is it that we have free will? I mean, we experience it, but at the same time, what is it that, like, determinism is true? Well, we experience that also. And the only way both could be true is if there's a God. So maybe this whole thing really is like suddenly I'm stumbling onto a good evidence for God here. Because God is freedom. And I don't mean like that's the dictionary definition of God, end of story. But I'm just saying, in context of what I'm talking about now, God is freedom. And if we were to have free will, then our will should align with God's will. And because now that I'm not blocking truth in any way, truth flows freely through me. It's like based on what I live in, I respond to that truthfully based on who I truly am. So, and when I was responding to sin, expressing who I am, then there's not freedom in that. And then discussing the change in identity is a little bit different of the topic, a little bit different of a topic, but discussing free will and compatibilism, that might be a pretty good description I just gave, hopefully, that, yeah, so it makes sense that, like, God's the maker of all and determines all, and yet we also have freedom. But we think of, like, robots or puppets or something, but it really belittles God to humanize him that much, to be like, if you make me in a programmed kind of a way, then I can't have freedom. It's like, that's taking the godness away from God. And if you discuss about a God that doesn't have godness, then you're really just discussing a straw man. And I don't mean that you're discussing a straw man or something, but just like, yeah, that's sort of the linchpin of the whole thing, the whole determinism and free will going together. That, like, it's just beautiful how elegant and tight and harmonious, like, the truth is, it's just, it's like beautiful music is described in those same words, elegant and tight and harmonious.
I find that who we are is definitely not in our heads. It's not our thoughts. It is something that is our whole. It's not something as easy as explaining philosophically what we are. It's very difficult for me to make sense of free will and determinism. Sometimes it feels like it's one, and other times it feels like it's the other. And the effect that consciousness and science especially has been showing to have on reality, even down to quantum particles, just looking at particles in some cases affects them and ways that are they just don't seem to make any sense. So that's something I don't think I could even give a coherent answer on. So you did a lot better than I could explaining how free will and determinism could still somehow find that harmony. I've thought before, although I'm not sure I agree with it now, that a significantly complex enough universe, if there were enough factors of it that we could never fully understand, even a tiny percentage of it, which I think is pretty accurate, it would never really be possible to learn on our own whether free will or determinism were true, because if it's that complex, everything could be ordered so that it happens in a certain way, and it would still be too complex for us to ever know. So I think that is definitely one of the hardest questions for an atheist to ever reconcile, is free will versus determinism. I think what you end up with more often than not is just, for a secularist, the perspective that they prefer, how they prefer to view reality that way. And the way you talk about truth flowing through you is very much at odds with the way most atheists think, but I don't think it's so much at odds with the way I think. The way that I explained my beliefs in that debate with Mr. Batman is the way I understand reality myself. That is not an act or some sort of contrived argument that I was making. That really is where my head is, right or wrong. It's the way that I see things. I see that being part of reality means that what appears to be truth is, if it matches everything, if it's harmonious with, I can't even explain it without launching into a long, like a description of justification through evidence and such. But that in your head, the experience isn't complicated at all. It feels just like you described. It flows through you, that you're resonating, if you will, with the way things actually are. And I've had my battles with mental illness before, and I've had doctors ask me if I was hearing voices or anything, and I never have. But for someone who is mentally ill and does see, schizophrenic delusions and things like that, it must be very scary for them to feel like there's something wrong and out of place with reality. And I'm sure you have your own perspective on that as well, and what they're going through. But it seems to me that what we experience together is just coming about in almost different colors. Like, we see different colors, but we're seeing the same thing, and it's just in different. I can't even. I mean, there's no words to explain what I'm trying to say. I would just have to come up with analogies, but to have the truth flowing through you, where you are not the arbiter of it, that resonates with me quite a bit, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, very good. And in essence, I think that's what self-honesty is. And, the question of, like, who we are that's unique, and what makes us unique and what makes us us, like, that's a pretty cool question. And maybe it's something that we don't really get to that often, like, as Christians, Like, I know I've got, like, this this desire for joy, this ambition for good things. I've got this enthusiasm, and at the same time, I'm like, very serious and seem on the surface. I don't take small things as serious. I don't necessarily seem that serious most of the time, but then I am a very serious guy. And I don't know, and the thing is that doesn't really mean much to me. Being part of this whole thing with Christ and with God and with the saints, and being involved with my brothers now, all of us flawed and doing our thing, and then being involved with our neighbors like you, Matthew. It's that all means a lot more to me. And that might be why Christians don't really get a lot to the whole individuality thing. Is we've kind of had our fill of it. And it's we're ready for this whole, this other thing, sort of like this truth thing. But I would like to ask you about the debate with Mr. Batman. But I don't know if there's something you want to respond there about.
Oh no, that's fine. I don't have much time, but I could probably do another 10 or 15 minutes. If you want to ask me, feel free to ask whatever you want.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to talk about real quick. And I had to look up what a Gish Gallop was. And I see where that description comes in. I do think Mr. Batman cares very much about the strength of his arguments. Now, he wasn't necessarily taking time to explain and prove why the arguments are strong or to dig into them. But then what I was wondering about your side of things is that you think abstracts like logic only exist with minds. And then if that's so, then how could there not be a universal mind? So
that is a very good point. And if anything, my entire position now rests on whether or not a mind can exist completely independently of reality. Because if logic is something that we perceive and sort of in a linguistic way, we communicate to each other A equals A, and those words, when I make that sound, the logic of it is just, if you will, the harmony that we both feel about, yes, this is right. So the logic in that sense means that, yes, what I'm saying does match reality. And if logic is more than that, if it is a set of rules, then it would have to come from a mind, and that mind would have to be able to exist outside of reality. And the only way that such a mind could let us know that it's there or that it can exist is if it reaches out to us. And I realize that. And that to me is the crux of all of it. And it's very important for me to, when I have these discussions, even in debates, to not try not to get caught up in the finer details of interpretation, but dig down to the truth that's underneath the reasons why people do what they do, and they want what they want, and what drives them, what's most important to them, because that is where everything is coming from in the other things that they say. And that's, I believe I mentioned that to Mr. Batman at one point, that we had been doing this for a while, and he could just ask me what he wanted to ask me instead of leading up to it. I did mention to him before the debate that I was focused on foundational beliefs, and I think that is really where we have to start, because if you don't start with those foundational beliefs, then you're going to end up speaking languages with a different alphabet than the person that you're talking to, and words are going to end up having different meanings because they have different connotations. And that's why I think appealing to a dictionary for what a word means is a bad idea. That'll just sort of take that as a metaphor, if you will, for what's most important to me about communicating different perspectives. Because if you were trapped on a desert island with someone who didn't speak English and you didn't speak any other languages, you would still eventually find a way to communicate with them. And I think that's what we have to do. Otherwise, we risk extremes becoming more extremes and people being less and less willing to talk to each other and work together and learn from each other. And if goodwill is not involved, where you're trying to learn from them and understand them in good faith, then if both people are not doing that, then it's actually making things worse, if you will.
Yeah, and I've definitely, I take it as quite the red flag if someone is using semantics to avoid hearing someone else. It's like, well, that's not going to be someone who's going to be fair in a discussion. And that sort of dishonesty, they're probably not really as honest with themselves as they should be either. Because the point of semantics, right, is like a tool to serve us so that we can talk to each other. Not a way to like, you know, well, I could take it this way, so now I don't hear you, nanner, nanner, nanner. You know, that I see that sometimes.
It's very difficult to do this for a long time and not become jaded and cynical about other people listening to you, because there are so many people who do exactly what you're saying, and they aren't actually trying to talk. I think part of it has to do with a desire for recognition and attention, and part of it has to do with some people's innate need to dominate rather than cohabitate and live in the harmony that we've been talking about. But that desire to dominate is, I would argue, probably the most dangerous to watch out for, because people will appear to be working with you. They will appear to be agreeing with you, but they're actually trying to subvert you to get what they want. And after a while, that the cynicism does make it very difficult to trust in any relationship, really, that someone is not doing that. So I think that a good sign of someone's decency as a person is their willingness to communicate in good faith with someone they don't know on the internet. If you're mean to someone on the internet and rude to them and hateful to them and just trying to make them look foolish when you don't know them, then a lot of times you just have to point out that someone's doing that, and they will apologize. Because there's that moment of realization that, oh, this is a real person I'm talking to. It's not just a name on a screen. And there are still a lot of people who are able to maintain that dehumanizing, impersonal, distancing hatred of someone who may very well just be trying to understand. So it takes a lot of courage to do this. And what you're trying to do, I would imagine, has led you to some pretty nasty conversations with people who don't want to hear what you have to say. And even if you and I don't come to agreement on Christ, then we will still be able to learn from each other and hopefully in some way make each other's lives better. And that, to me, is the whole point. And I don't understand how anyone can not value those things. I've always considered myself more of a cynic, but trying to be more optimistic. My wife helps me with that because she's a very optimistic person. But I just try to go into every conversation hoping that someone is actually willing to listen. It's always a little bit disappointing when they're not, but that's life, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm rambling again.
No, you're good. And yeah, I guess yeah, dealing with people and all that, just it is what it is. Where you know, I've learned to just accept that I can't control other people, and that means that I'm not as close with people sometimes. Because I'm not really going to step into that place of like the relationship starts to be co-manipulative or something. That's just not something that I do. But yeah, so going into all these discussions, I really don't mind people disagreeing with me. And I think I find that I tend to talk to people who are okay with disagreeing. Or, you know, I talk to trolls, and trolls are in the disagreeing world. So the challenge for me would be to reach out to that world that, you know, people who always want everything to be more agreeable and friendly and hunky-dory and stuff. I think I have to find a lot of wisdom and peace and have to be very good at expressing the things I want to express and teach. And so I got some years of maturing as far as all of that goes, so I can communicate sort of more on the level of what I know. But you, Matthew, you don't really have anything that's necessarily telling you Christianity can't be true or something like that. So yeah, I'd like to continue these discussions and see if there's a way to share Christianity with you as I know it, where you can just enjoy learning about it and be interested. And I guess I got to start thinking of what places do I want to focus on first, you know?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. I'm these topics have always fascinated me. They've always been important to me to discuss, and the important issues of life. Not too many people actually want to talk about because it's either something that's going to lead them to discomfort, and they're not ready for that. They don't want that. They have enough stress in their life, or it's going to make them angry for some reason. And most people, I find, do their best to avoid conflict, and disagreement is far too often seen as conflict when it doesn't have to be. If anything, healthy disagreement is vital. It's something that we have to have. Otherwise, we'll end up killing each other off just because we see things differently. And the what we end up getting out of interacting with people who see things differently is beautiful and healthy in its own way, for its own reason, that doesn't have anything to do, in my opinion, with trying to change their mind. It's enjoying the shared experience of life together, and people who are interested in doing that in whatever way they want. That to me is the best way to spend your time. And especially for me, I've always been interested in learning about other languages and other cultures, and especially other perspectives, because there is always that doubt in the back of my mind that I need to check myself first. I need to reconsider my perspective first before I even worry about anyone else's. And anytime that I hear you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, my first response is, am I? It's not no, it's am I? So I think that you're right. We should definitely continue these discussions, and it would be a very good idea to focus on specifics. I think would help navigate through just how vastly different our perspectives are, because they'll provide points of reference.
Yeah, and how much have you read the Bible?
Sorry, I keep forgetting that I have to tap the mute button because I've got background noise here, and it makes it's called hot miking. I don't know if you've heard that term, but
Oh yeah.
having background noise. I've read it through at least twice, and then large sections of it just as needed over time. When something would come up and I would think about it, and someone would ask me about a certain section, I would go read it. But actually reading it through from start to finish, I've read it twice.
Okay, well, I mean, I like to talk about it, and since you've read it through before, that doesn't really require reading it through all the way. We can just focus on something if we want to. So yeah, we just start out just talking about Genesis, and then going from there. Not necessarily book by book or whatever, but start at the beginning of the book and then talk about it through there. And yeah, I'd really like to have that perspective offered to you in a way that you're interacting with it and giving it an opportunity to be the best perspective, or that if it might be the best perspective, then maybe you'll have a chance to see that. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I know when I talk to someone who cares about Christ as much as you do, and I have spoken to many before who genuinely are in it for the right reasons, as far as I can tell, saving other people, helping other people come to Christ. I think that is it's always clear when someone is focused on that, and it's important to them to help others in that way. And that to me is prompt enough that I have to respect it, no matter how differently we see things. I have a lot of respect for that. And devoting yourself to something that involves helping others and making the world a better place in any way is noble, in my opinion. And I think that we had originally talked about potentially doing this every couple of weeks. Is that something that you'd be open to?
Yeah, I'd be open to whenever is good for you. So soon is good for me, because if we're gonna talk about Genesis and just start talking about the Bible, like I've been so deep into it for the past few years, like I think I've sort of lost touch some with like how people might not know that much about it. And so like there's so much that to me is like preaching to the choir that there's probably a lot I could be offering people that I'm not, because to me it seems like so repetitive, but to a lot of people it's not, you know? So by talking about it with you, I think I get more of the perspective of, then people can hear it, benefit from hearing our discussions. But I can also become better at discussing it with people. So I would really like it for sure.
Good. Well, I'm going to say goodnight because, as I said, my wife's parents are here and I'm being antisocial. Shame on me. So you have a great night, and it's been great talking to you. And I'm sorry it's been so long, but as I said, my wife and I are buying a house, and life's a bit crazy right now. So I will try to stick to our agreement of every couple of weeks. And we could go ahead and set a day now if you want to do 2 weeks from today. That would be the 19th.
But I'd like to let you get back to your family and not have to think about double checking that you don't have plans or anything. So we need to talk more over email, I think.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But I'd like to
okay. Well,
time, yeah.
It's 6 o'clock there, your time?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nicholas, and thank you for hosting this.
Thank you.
And for being so open and understanding.
Well, thank you, Matthew.
Well, if you have anything that you'd like to say, I mean, don't hold back. I mean, when I talked to Mr. Batman, he I believe something he said he liked to say was repent at the end of every discussion. So if feel free to add anything you want that is in line with your beliefs. I typically just say take care and I'll talk to you soon, but feel free.
No, I always just say best wishes and hopeful prayers to those who don't yet know Messiah. But I just really appreciate the discussions. Thanks for being here. And with that, I think I'll just close the video right here. So goodbye, audience.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. And good night. I'll talk to you soon.
Good night. Oh, yeah. And shalom to the brethren. And just for the record, Matthew, I don't shalom the not brethren, because you can only get shalom. It's the perfect peace that only Messiah can give. So, yeah, I'd like you to have shalom. We got some work to do first.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Thank you very much, Matthew.
Bye.